Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Up Close with the Department of Defense SBIR STTR programs. I'm Rebecca Todd, your moderator this morning. I work as Innovation Specialist for the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. We are taxpayer funded to provide confidential one-on-one consulting, training, and market research services for entrepreneurs and established businesses across the state. We have been working in Arkansas for over 40 years and have 10 regional offices that allow us to serve companies where they're at. One more office is slated to open later this year. And most of our regions have at least one university-based center. Through our center's competitively awarded federal and state technology grants, the ASB/TDC is able to offer continued outreach through events like this webinar, where we share information about the SBIR STTR program for statewide and national audiences. We help entrepreneurs with each step of preparing and submitting Small Business Innovation Research or SBIR proposal applications, as well as state level ones for supplemental technology commercialization funds. In our last FAST project year, we supported 122 clients, helped with 39 SBIR STTR proposal submissions, and our clients won 14 total awards. To date, our clients have won over 70 SBIR STTR awards across the participating agencies. Through our center's industry database subscriptions, we also can locate market data to help our clients prepare key sections of their SBIR proposals, like the commercialization plan. So everyone who's registered for today's event will be receiving a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recording within 2 days via GoToWebinar email. You'll also notice in your control panel that I've included the slides as handouts, so you can access them there too. Before we get started, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with GoToWebinar. So first, you should see that you have a control panel that's located on the right side of your screen. You can minimize this panel by clicking on the arrow button that's orange in the upper left corner. And you can expand the panel by clicking on that same button. So take a moment to practice. And second, you can submit questions using the question pane. This is located near the bottom of the control panel. And I do encourage everyone to submit questions throughout the presentation. We'll have time at the end for a Q&A with our speaker. Before we kick off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Dr. Jenny Servo. Dr. Servo is the founder and president of Dawnbreaker. This is a woman-owned small business and a leading provider of training, market research, and commercialization support to the small business innovation research and small business technology transfer communities. Jenny has developed and managed programs for the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, Department of Energy, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Transportation, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, National Science Foundation, and the Small Business Administration. Since 1990, Dawnbreaker has provided commercialization mentoring and support to over 9,000 SBIR and STTR awardees. Cumulatively, these firms have received more than $2.5 billion in Phase 3 funding. Through the Small Business Administration, Dr. Servo and her team provide the train-the-trainer services to increase the ability of state, federal, and local service providers to assist clients prepare competitive SBIR STTR proposals. And this training takes advantage of the online tutorials developed for SBA, which can be found on the on the SBIR.gov website under Resources, and then by selecting Tutorials. Dr. Servo is the author of 2 books associated with commercialization. The first is Business Planning for Scientists and Engineers, 4th edition. This one has sold over 20,000 copies. The other is Advanced Technology Programs, Commercialization and Business Planning Guide for the post-award period. Dr. Servo has numerous publications on innovation in the workplace, the futurist, and instructional design. Most recently, she led the team that developed the report entitled Women's Inclusion in Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program, that was released by the National Women's Business Council in August of 2020. With that, I'll now turn the presentation over to Jenny. Take it away, Jenny.
Rebecca, thank you so much. It's very nice to be with you today. When I think of states that do a really great job supporting the SBIR and the STTR program, I think of Arkansas. So you do a great job, Rebecca, and your team, and I'm very pleased to be here with you today. So we're going to take a look at DoD. And there's a lot to look at. So bear with me as we go through this today. This just reiterates some of the things that Rebecca has mentioned about Dawnbreaker, and I'm just going to go past that. But most of our work has been with the Department of the Navy, the Department of Energy, and the National Science Foundation, as well as many smaller ones. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to start by looking at the DoD budget. And then we're going to look at the guiding principles that are affecting all of DoD right now, which are the modernization technology priorities. There is so much change going on with DoD that we're going to start by talking about the traditional BAA or Broad Agency Announcement Schedule. And we'll look at the basics of the services and the components and what they provide if they're using the traditional BAA. We will then talk about out-of-cycle BAAs, which has come into being over the last few years. And then we'll talk about the best method to find upcoming BAAs, differences in requirements, the focus on transition, and then we'll end with talking about Air Force and AFWERX. So that's where we're going, so hold on. So I'm sure you've seen this. The SBIR and the STTR budget combined for FY20 across all agencies was about $4 billion, which is a huge amount of money. And almost half of that was the Department of Defense. And so the Department of Defense is a very important player in all of this. So what happens is the Department of Defense is divided into services and components. And the services are obviously the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, and 3/4 of that DoD budget, that $1.97 billion, 3/4 of that goes to the 3 services. So they're very important to understand. The rest of the money goes to the 11 components which are listed there. And they're all quite different. The largest of the smaller ones is Missile Defense Agency, or MDA. And the newest addition is the Space Development Agency, or SDA, which came into being a little over a year ago. So the DoD program by itself is as diverse, or even more diverse, than the rest of the SBIR and the STTR programs with which you're familiar. So there's so much that goes on in this arena. So what happened a number of years ago in 2018 is the National Defense Strategy document was released. And in that document, it talked about how there was a great deal of concern about the US, again, losing its competitiveness from a DoD perspective relative to China and relative to Russia. And so there was a lot of concern. And a person named Dr. Mike Griffin, who was the former Undersecretary of Defense for the Research and Engineering part of DoD, developed what are called the top 10 technology focus areas. And those have become the modernization technology priorities. And those priorities affect all of DoD. And so you will see them in most of the solicitations. These are the modernization technology priorities. So artificial intelligence, biotech, autonomy, cybersecurity, cyber-directed energy, fully networked command, control, and communications, hypersonics, microelectronics, quantum science, space, and 5G. And these are also listed in the BAAs as the RT and L, L standing for laboratories, so research technology and laboratories. And so definitions of each of these you will find in the BAAs. But the most important thing for you to understand at the beginning is that this is affecting everything that is going on across all of DoD. Now, with that as background, I'm going to start building out the DoD program and your understanding of it, starting with the most basic part. There used to be what is called a traditional BAA schedule. And for those of you who are new with respect to DoD, rather than calling it a solicitation, they call it a broad agency announcement. And as you know, probably from working with other agencies, is different agencies call the solicitation different things. So here is called the BAA. Now, historically, there have been 3 traditional BAAs released, and they're referred to in the column over on the left-hand side. It always will have the fiscal year, so we're example right now in 21, and the first solicitation or BAA that comes out in the fiscal year will have the number 1 after it if it's a SBIR or SBIR BAA. The A over here on the left-hand side again stands for STTRs. So STTRs are identified by A, B, and C. They are the 3 in sequence that are released through the traditional schedule. And then the SBIRs are referred to by the numbers 1, 2, and 3. And so these are the approximate dates. There's a pre-release date, and we'll come back and talk about that in a moment. There is the date when the BAA opens and closes. So let me go back and talk just a little bit about pre-release. We'll get into it more in a moment. DoD is a contracting organization. And contracting organizations have different guidelines that they follow. They are, by virtue of being a contracting organization, they are obliged to share information equivalently with all potential bidders. Now, what the SBIR program has done in light of that is to say we will have a 1-month period that we'll call pre-release, when individuals can contact the technical point of contact, the topic author or the TPOC, and in the solicitation or the BAA that is posted, it will have their email address, their phone number, and their name. And they can be contacted directly, privately, during this pre-release period. After that period is up, then any questions that one has can still be asked, but they become public. And so pre-release is an important period to know when this is, because it's very good to be able to ask your questions of a topic author privately. That's always preferential. Open means when the agency is open to accept proposals. Close means the last date that it will close it. And these are general. It doesn't have the specific dates here, because I'm just talking in general about the traditional schedule. Now, down at the bottom, I have just a clarification again and giving you examples. FY 20.1 has already opened and closed. Same with FY 21.2. FY 21.3 will be coming out later in the year, and these are all SBIR or SBIR. STTR in the Department of Defense oftentimes refers to it as SITR, but it's STTR, and those are A, B, and C. All right, so CITES is the acronym for SBIR STTR Interactive Topic Information System. After that pre-release period, when you submit your questions, they need to be posted publicly, and the answers are posted publicly as well. So the reason why it's best to try and ask your questions during the pre-release period is that you don't want to tip your hand, meaning you as a proposer may have some insight into from yourself, as to different approaches that might be appropriate to use. And you might want to ask that question privately of the topic author, but you don't want to tip your hand in CITES and ask that type of question publicly, because you may be giving other people ideas as well. So it's always good to take advantage of that. Now, when you reach out to a topic author, it's not to talk about you. It's not to talk about what your company does. It's not to promote yourself. When you reach out to the topic author, it is specifically to seek clarification on a topic, because there may be multiple topics in the solicitation that you're thinking of responding to. Or you may need to have some more clarification because some part of the topic description is unclear. So the purpose for reaching out to the TPOC or the topic author is to seek clarification on the topic. And so what I would suggest that you do is to send an email, first of all, and this is just an example. And in the email, you want to make it clear that you have reviewed the topic, because it's very important to make sure that you have reviewed the topic and any of the references that are provided. You don't want to ask questions of the TPOC that could be answered by a very careful read of the topic itself. So you specify, which topic, which broad agency announcement, and that you have a couple of lingering questions, and you would like to have a brief phone call with them. They may or may not give you a phone call. They may prefer to respond in email. One thing that I should mention is that although during this pre-release period, this is when you can do this, some of the components, especially the smaller ones, may not actually give you the name of the individual and their contact information. And I'll share an example of that with you as we go forward, because all of these components behave somewhat differently. But assuming that most of them will allow you to do so, which is the case, then what you might want to do is to include 1 or 2 questions as an example. Now, I looked at the most recent SBIR solicitations. 21.1 has open and closed, 21.2 the same thing, and then 20.3 I'm using last year's because that has not been released yet. But I wanted to show you something that is important to recognize if you're dealing with the Department of Defense. If I look at Navy as an example, in the first SBIR release, they had 100 topics. In the second SBIR release, they had 39 topics. And typically, in the last release, they have very few. So you should recognize that the agencies may have more topics in one release than another, because that is the case. Army has been going through reorganization. And so Army did not participate in the 21.1 or the 21.2 or last year in the previous one, okay, because it's going through organizations and it's been releasing out of cycle BAAs, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. Air Force, in terms of the traditional cycle, had 3 direct to phase 2. DP2 stands for direct to phase 2. And so during the 21.1 cycle, Air Force released 3 topics related to this. In 21.2, they had 15 traditional topics. CBD did not participate, that's ChemBio did not participate in the first solicitation, did in the second, did in the third. But you get the general idea that you should not make the assumption that the services and the components equivalently participate in each of the solicitations or BAAs. They don't, okay? Some of them, so for example, at the bottom, I have Army, DARPA, and SDA, which is space, did not use traditional at all, okay? And so the purpose of this slide is just to show you that, to sensitize you to that. Now, the primary site for the Department of Defense has shifted in the past year to DSIP. And if you go to DSIP and you look at the previous releases, and that's what I did here, this is a screenshot from DSIP for the archived solicitations from 2021. And you'll see at the top, DoD SBIR 2021.2, that's a traditional one, but the arrows are pointing to things that are out of cycle. And you'll notice that they just look different, okay? They don't have a 0.2 or an A or a B. They are different. And there's a lot of out of cycle that is happening. And that's one of the things that makes the DoD program very complex, because there is the desire to be very fast, to make sure technology can get to the warfighter quickly, and that the challenge that was put forth in 2018 can be met, and that the U.S. Department of Defense is the leader relative to global competitors and foreign foes. So these are out-of-cycle BAAs, and we'll talk about CSOs as we go forward. All right, so this is the DSIP website. This is the portal that one should go to if they are looking for opportunities. So over on the right-hand side, this is a screenshot of what the landing page looks like. And under quick links in the middle of the page, you see BAA schedule. Over on the right-hand side, it tells you what is active right now. So what is active right now is Army SBIR 2021.4. 4 follows the 1, 2, 3. This is SBIR. It's using that nomenclature, but it is out of cycle, so the number is higher than 1, 2, or 3. DARPA, this is their topics. Then it tells you how many topics are open in each. Okay. Topics and subtopics, you can also get to CITES. That's over here on the right-hand side. CITES is where the questions are posted after the pre-release period. So you can find the topic, the questions, and the answers. There are a variety of different training materials that are referred to as job aids, and we will look at those as we go forward. And then also frequently asked questions, that we will look at that as well. And then there's a registration site, but this is the place that you need to go to. So I wanted to start taking you through a traditional BAA. And again, I don't know the diversity of the audience that is here today. I don't know your experience. So what I'm doing is I'm basically building out from the foundation, the most fundamental things, and then we're going to add layers of complexity as we go forward. I did also send along the specific BAA 21.1 SBIR for you to download. So this is what I'm referencing, just that one BAA, and you have a copy of it. Again, it's not open, it's closed, but I'm using that as an example. So at the top right, you see version 6. So one thing that you should be aware of is that these BAAs are updated. And so you may go in and download the BAA as soon as it comes out. And you may think, well, I don't need to go back again. But you do. Excuse me, just one sec. You do need to go back because the BAAs will be updated. They may find that something needs further clarification from the nature of the questions that are being asked. They may change the deadline, which appears that they did in this case. That's why it's highlighted in red. Okay, so first of all, be aware you need to go back. At the beginning of the document, it lists the participating components. And so that's going to be in one of the first few pages. And so we see the list of services and components that are participating in this particular BAA. Down towards the bottom on the right-hand side, there's an arrow, and it says basically sign up to receive emails about updates. Definitely do that, because if you're working on a proposal, you want to make sure that you get those updates so that you're not working off of old information. Now, the guidelines that follow in this BAA are general guidelines. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is when you download a BAA such as this, that has all of the topics concatenated or attached to this one BAA document, at the beginning of each of these sections, like the Department of the Navy, the Department of the Air Force, it will have its own instructions as well. So there are instructions at the beginning of this very large document, which is about 300 pages, because it contains all the topics. So there's general instructions at the beginning, and then when you go to each of these different services, there is also going to be instructions. Sometimes it will say things such as, we are adhering to the general instructions that have been provided. Sometimes it will specify that they're doing things differently. So it's always important that you look at the component instructions as well as the instructions at the beginning. Now, this is, again, at the beginning of this BAA that you would have downloaded. And I'm pointing to a couple of things that are important, just so that you know how to navigate, again, not knowing your background. So there's a lot of fundamental definitions. And usually I go to this later, and I don't bid on DoD, SBIR, and STTR. We help companies that have, primarily with commercialization. But this section called Proposal Fundamentals, as you get into the proposal, is going to be important as a reference. But where one goes immediately, if you are looking to prepare a phase 1 proposal, is the section called phase 1 proposal. And that's where we're going to linger. We're going to go into that in more detail. It's always important to understand the phase 1 evaluation criteria for any agency, because that is how you're going to be evaluated, and you write to the evaluation criteria. Over on the right-hand side, this is a continuation of the table of contents. It talks about technical data rights, which, if you are new, you probably don't know the value of this, and it's huge. So I will talk with you about technical data rights as we get into this document. And then at the bottom, you see, starting on page 52, it has the Department of the Navy topics with the component descriptions at the beginning. Because there's 100 topics, Air Force is down to 360. It didn't have very many. So you see the page numbers. Okay. One of the first things to look at when you go into the instructions is called Summary of Component Programs. And every one of those BAAs will have a summary of component programs. And the reason that that is important becomes apparent when we look at this. There is, again, so much diversity. In this particular BAA, the Army, it has information about the Army, even though the Army did not participate in this one. But it says that it provides the award as a base not to exceed 111,500, and then there's an option of 56,000. If I look right underneath for the Navy, in that same column, the base is 140,000. The option is not to exceed 100,000. I continue down to DHA. It says 250,000. Okay, so there's tremendous diversity just in cost. Then you come to the duration column, and Army says 6-month base and 4-month phase 1 option. Same thing for Navy. Well, actually, Navy has 6-month phase 1 option. So again, the amount of time is different. Do be aware that some of these are coming over to the left-hand column where it says DoD component. This particular BAA also includes direct to phase 2, which we have not yet discussed, but we will. So the reason why some of the numbers are so much bigger is because it's not phase 1s. Okay, so some of this is direct to phase 2. Coming over to the second column from the far right, technical and business assistance called TABA, which is something that has been added in the past 1.5 years. You'll see that it varies in terms of the amount, and it varies in terms of whether or not the component uses it. And then finally, the technical volume, the number of pages, again, varies widely. Keep in mind, like the 30-page one is a Navy direct to phase 2. So you have to look at all of those. But this summary table, which you will find in every one of these BAAs, is extremely helpful. And it's very important because there's so much variability that you are aware of that right at the beginning. So always look for this section. One of the other things that is important is marking. And this again is mentioned in the general instructions. You will also find this type of thing in the component. I teach a Train the Trainer course. And recently in one of my Train the Trainer courses, someone asked about requesting proposals through FOIA. And you don't want that, okay? When you're submitting a proposal, and neither does the agency, okay? The agency wants your information to be confidential. You want your information to be confidential, but somebody out there might want to see it. So how do you prevent that? You prevent that from marking proprietary information. And every BAA will specify how to do that. It is very important that you do it. I would not get hung up about it when I'm drafting the proposal, but before I'm going to submit it, that would be the first thing I'm going to put on is I'm going to go through and mark everything that is proprietary. And as you see here under 1, you put the marking on the first page of each volume with the appropriate legend. So you follow very explicitly everything that is said to protect your information, which the agency wants to do as well, and you want to make sure that that is the case. Now, in that table of contents, there was another section called Technical Data Rights. And this is very important. And if you've worked with DoD before, you are aware of this. If you have not, and again, I don't know the audience that is here today, if you have worked, say, with NSF or HHS or DOE granting organizations, it's very unlikely that you've heard about technical data rights. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about it. First of all, you mark this in a different way. It's not covered by the marking for the proposal. The marking for the proposal is so that your proposal information is not shared. Technical data rights is something that you can protect for up to 20 years. That's why I've highlighted it. Okay, so these first few lines sound rather strange, and I'm going to read it with you just so that you understand what this is saying, because it really is a kind of a contorted statement. So it says rights in technical data, including software, developed under the terms of any contract resulting from proposals submitted in response to this BAA, generally remain with the contractor, except that the government obtains a royalty-free license to use such technical data only for government purposes during the period commencing with contract award and ending 20 years after completion of the project under which the data was generated. Now, what this means, and if you continue on, it says upon expiration of the 20-year restrictive license, the government has unlimited rights in the SBIR data. What this means is as you are doing the work, let's assume that you win an award, that when you submit a report, when you share anything, you put another type of marking on it to protect your technical data. And it prevents the government from sharing it with anyone. Because in the past, before probably back about 20 years ago, what DoD often would do is want the large primes to be able to develop the technologies. But the SBIR technical data or the technical data rights prevents that and says if you mark things, your information cannot be used for a period of 20 years. After that, it can be. Now, on the right-hand side, it indicates a couple of things, but one is a tutorial where David Metzger, who's the leading expert on SBIR data rights, has 5 very brief tutorials about SBIR data rights and their value. I'm going to go through a couple of highlights, but if you want to really understand this, and it is a complex topic, your takeaway should be always protect your technical data rights. You're going to be asked about it when you submit your BAA response, your proposal, and then you have to continue to do it. All right, so what is SBIR or STTR data? Is recorded writing reduced to writing. So source code, sketches, drawings, formulas, reports, descriptions of your technologies are referred to as this technical data. It has to be technical in nature, meaning it does not protect your financials, it does not protect your marketing methods or anything of that sort. And the data that is being talked about must have been created under the SBIR or STTR award. If you developed developed data or technology before starting the program with your own private funds, that's different. Technical data is created under the SBIR or STTR award. Now, why should you protect it? And where can you find guidance on this? You can find guidance in something called the Policy Directive, and there is a particular legend there on page 54 that describes the markings that you need to put on things. So why am I bothering to talk about this? It is a form of trade secret. So you basically protect through non-disclosure. Patents are disclosure. You protect trade secret SBIR data rights through non-disclosure. And what happens is you then become eligible for Phase 3 awards from the government. Phase 3 awards from the government are not funded with SBIR or STTR funds. And however, the award is for work that derives from, extends, or completes prior SBIR or STTR efforts. I'm not reiterating STTR, but it pertains to both. And you can get additional funding for research and development services, products, production, or any combination of both. So what makes this valuable is that you can then get sole source contracts. You don't have to compete for a Phase 3. There's no size standard, meaning if you protect your SBIR data rights, and let's assume that you decide that you're not going to scale up to produce large quantities of this, but a prime contractor such as Lockheed or Northrop Grumman or Raytheon may benefit from this. They can acquire your company and the SBIR, STTR data rights because there's no size standard, meaning a large prime can acquire you and your SBIR data rights and pay you handsomely for that. And then they can get sole source contracts. There's no limit on the amount of money. Okay, so that's the benefit of all of this. Okay, so make sure, going back to the BAA, that when it's talking about technical data rights, that you know that long term it's going to really benefit your company and you're going to protect it. And you're going to basically say, yes, I want to protect my technical data rights. Now I'm going to leave that. Okay. All right, so we've looked at a couple of concepts that are very important. You want to protect the information in your proposal. You want to protect your SBIR, STTR data rights or technical data. And I want to make sure you know what that means and you do it. So now, okay, I'm going to write a proposal in response to a BAA. What am I going to prepare? Okay. At the beginning of this BAA, it has an introduction and it tells you the different volumes. When you are submitting a proposal, you are submitting an application package. It contains a number of different things that are referred to as volumes. Volume 1 is the proposal cover, Volume 2 is the technical proposal, and you see the remainder. Okay. You also do have to take a fraud, waste, and abuse training course and online, and then provide evidence that you have done that. And page limits are not usually indicated in the general instructions. We looked at where they were before, and they will be reiterated in the component section. Now I'm going to linger on the technical volume because you could do everything else right. But if you have not done the technical proposal well, you're not going to win. Okay, so the technical volume is where I would recommend that you focus. It's the heart of the proposal. You do not be innovative with the outline. You follow exactly what it says. So these are the sections that are identified in the general instructions at the beginning of the BAA. When you go to the specific component ones, you would just verify that it's the same, okay? All right, so now that was at the beginning. Now I'm looking at the Navy. The Navy's part of this BAA, and I've gone to that component and I see, or actually service, and I see that it has its own instructions. So here on the left-hand side, it says the following must be met in order to be deemed compliant. If you don't follow these directly, that it will be deemed non-compliant and shall be rejected. So you see volume 2 is the technical volume, and it tells you not to exceed 10 pages. It tells you the margin, it tells you the point font, okay, and so it tells you very specifically what to do. It tells you how to handle headers and footers and things of that sort. And it also tells you that you need to include and identify the phase 1 option description, and the option will be exercised upon selection for phase 2. In other words, it's not automatic that you receive an option. Looking at another one of the components, again, just to make the point that it's important that you do that. In that same BAA, at the end, it had SOCOM. And with US SOCOM, under technical volume, it says it should not exceed 5 pages. An offeror shall submit a slide deck not to exceed 15 PowerPoint slides in volume 5, and they're no set forth. So anyway, it goes on and it tells you what it wants. So it's some of the agencies refer, or the components refer back to the general instructions. Some indicate their own unique instructions. Other SOCOM differences in the pre-release period, okay? It basically says that that you, let's see, I want to make sure that I had it here. I think I included the wrong part. I'm sorry about that, but basically what it says in the pre-release period is that they do not give you the name of the topic author, and you may not contact them directly. You can send an email to the email address, but you cannot ask them a question directly. My take on that is because SOCOM is very small, their staff is very small, and they don't have the bandwidth to do that. All right, so what have we done so far? We're talking about the traditional BAAs right now, and we've looked at the instructions, the general instructions, and made the point that the components have their own instructions as well. And we looked at the summary of component table, which is very important, which highlights the differences. Now I want to look at some of the topics. This is a bit small, okay, which is the reason why I wanted to send the BAA so that you can look at it separately, okay? So the Navy, again, just reiterating, that most of the Navy's topics are in the first release. In the beginning of this, on the right-hand side, it talks about ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulation. And ITAR means that there are restrictions on what you can do. And it mentions that very briefly in the top couple of lines. Again, on SBIR.gov, we had another attorney who specializes in ITAR talk about that. And so there is a tutorial there so that you can look at that. One of the things that is very important when dealing with the Department of Defense is you should make the assumption that you cannot release information without approval from DoD, from the particular service or component, because we're dealing with defense. And so, so there are FAR clauses that will be in your contract that will say that. So it talks about ITAR, tells you the objective, gives you a description. It goes on And it talks about in phase 1 what it wants accomplished, in phase 2 what it wants accomplished, in phase 3 what it wants accomplished, and then it gives you references. So again, if you're new to Department of Defense, if you've dealt with granting organizations before, this is not investigator initiated. You are responding to a need, a national need that the Department of Defense has, and they are inviting you, the small business, to help solve a problem and put forward your proposal to do that, okay? And they're very specific about this. So what is unique about this Navy topic? It does identify in there the concerns about foreign nationals. You will see that coming up. Sometimes it's just identifying that. It also mentions in here, in this particular topic, that phase 2 is likely to become classified, and therefore you must be able to have secret level facility clearance. It's important to know that up front because Navy topics are different than other component topics, and we'll look at some that are very different and don't have that kind of restriction. It also calls out that a demonstration is going to be needed, and it tells you specifically which organizations that will be with. And there is the expectation that you will work with Dahlgren. So it calls all of that out very explicitly in the Navy topics. So one thing I should mention, we worked with the Navy for 15 years, and the Navy is very explicit about where technology is going. It makes it in some ways easier to develop relationships because you know who you have to develop relationships with. They don't put out topics unless they know where it's going to go. Priorities may change, but that's certainly one thing that you can definitely realize with respect to Navy. All right, DHA, Defense Health Agency. A lot of people don't realize that there is a health agency and topics within DoD. And so sometimes if we're working with a company that is seeking NIH funding, we'll tell them, hey, be sure to look at DHA. Now, in this particular BAA, it had just one topic, or one release rather, and it had 13 topics in this. And this one was quite interesting. It's called a body nonconformal terahertz medical imager. And you may not be able to read the objective, but basically I'll read it to you because it's very interesting. Design and build a terahertz medical imager in the form of a small, flexible, layered rectangular blanket with internal functional components that can be wrapped around the torso of a wounded patient and provide images of internal anatomy. It goes on and it talks about technical performance that's expected. Okay. What is unique about this DHA topic is the focus is on the performance and the deliverables in phase 1 and 2. It does not talk about any other services in detail, but it does talk about FDA approval and the need to plan for that. So again, if you're developing a platform technology such as this, it may be something where you could go to HHS afterwards, or maybe go to another agency to seek additional funding. It also does specify in that topic that the work may transition to an acquisition program, but it is not specified what it is. All right, so I just wanted to give you the flavor of differences in topics. And then we're going to look at the cost part of this. The third volume of the traditional BAAs is the cost proposal. Now, for anything regarding the cost proposal, you're going to go back to DSIP. And with DSIP, on the left-hand side, you see that it's got training materials, which is what I've selected. And there is a volume called the cost volume, and they have a job aid. So what DoD has here, and it's the same actually with NASA because it's the same vendor that is using this approach. they have these job aids. And so the item on the right-hand side is an example of the job aid. It's an 18-page document, and basically it shows you how to plug in information related to the cost volume. All right, so I'm just sort of reiterating, because we're going to be transitioning to another part of this, what the standard outline is for a phase one. This proposal cover sheet, technical volume, cost volume, company commercialization report, and a variety of supporting documents, and always check the component level instructions. Okay, so what about STTR or STTR? Because everything I've shared with you came from the 21.1 SBIR document. So again, I'm not sure of the audience that is here or your background, but the guidelines for STTR are the same, irrespective of the agency with which you're doing the work. And so what this is comparing, on the left-hand side is the requirements for SBIR, and on the right-hand side is for STTR. However, I want to discuss this because I don't want to give you the wrong impression. With SBIR, a small business doesn't have to subcontract anything at all, but it could subcontract up to 33% if it chose to. But that's at the option of the company. It does not need to do that, okay? On the right-hand side, the applicant is always going to be the small business, and sometimes university partners may think that they can be the applicant, and they cannot. The applicant is always going to be the small business because this is the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. The research institution must do a minimum of 30%. 30% is discretionary, meaning that the company could say, I'm going to do the additional 30%. So the small business could do 70% and the research institution 30%. Or the small business could say, I really need more help from the research institution. I'm going to give them that 30% discretionary. So 60% would go to the research institution at the small business discretion because they're using the mandatory 30% and the discretionary. Or they could say, 30% discretionary, I'm going to include a large prime, which you can do. So that's how to read this. Be sure, if you're working with the Department of Defense, to consider including a large prime contractor, because more often than not, your technology ultimately is going to transition to them because they're going to be the lead system integrator on a large platform like an aircraft or a submarine or a ship. If you're doing something small like a UUV or a software, then that's not going to be the case. But if you're making a component that's going to go into a large platform, more often than not, the prime is going to be your ultimate customer. And so they are very interested in getting involved with you early on. And so Lockheed Martin on the left, this is their a page on their website. They have for many, many years been very involved with the SBIR and the STTR program, and they have an office focused on that. And you see on the right-hand side helpful links. And so they're very aware and very involved with all of this. The one on the right-hand side is Northrop Grumman. Again, very involved, has been for a long time, and it gives you links to all different types of resources. So how should you involve them? If you want to, they have test facilities, so that's one way. Or let's say that you're working on a material, maybe it's a corrosion issue, or there's some material that is not wearing well in some applications, you can ask them to give you coupons for that. You do have to be concerned about technical data rights. You do not want them, or actually even a subcontractor, to create things because the SBIR data rights can flow down to them. But to have them involved with testing is very beneficial. A question that comes up a lot regarding STTR in every program is, can the PI be from the university? And the answer is yes. In the case of DoD, the answer is yes. They can be from the small business or from the research institution at the time of award and during the conduct of the proposed project. And I'm sure you've seen that before. It is no different here. You do need to negotiate IP rights up front, and there is a form that one can download from the from various sites, and this is just an example of that. All right, so this is a sample of a STTR topic. Just wanted to again introduce a different component and show you what their topics are like. So this is a sample STTR topic from Defense Microelectronics, and it's integrated MEMS supercapacitor for energy harvesting applications. And it's briefer than the one we saw for Navy. It's actually even briefer than the one we saw for DHA, but it does specify what they want to see done in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And so again, they're all very different. I don't want to scare you with the one that I showed you for the Navy, okay? So I want you to be aware that these components are all very different. So in the STTR 21.A BAA, it has a similar component guideline. And so the Navy, you see that their STTR has a base and an option. You see the duration. You see a phase 1 option is required, that they do provide TABA, and the technical volume is 10 pages. DMEA, not to exceed 167,000, 6 months. No phase 1 option, not available, 20 pages. Okay. So again, just be aware of the differences. Direct to phase 2. So this started as a pilot a number of years ago, and then it worked very well. And one of the agencies that was a leader with this was DARPA. And then the Air Force and Navy and most of the other larger components now do direct to phase 2. And so DP2 is another way of calling direct to phase 2. It's not available for all components. I mean, they could if they want to, but the smaller programs often are considering, do they want to give more awards? What is the, is there a urgent need for something? So it's available for selected topics. You cannot, as a proposer, say, oh, I'd like to do this as a direct to phase 2. They call it out as a direct to phase 2. Okay, so, and if the topic is identified as a direct to phase 2 topic, and if you've completed phase 1 type task with other money and can provide evidence of this, then you may respond to a direct to phase 2 topic. All right, so again, this is just showing you in that summary of components programs, the diversity of them. So Navy has a direct to phase 2. This was again out of the 21.1 BAA, Air Force, NGA, and SOCOM. And they all are slightly different. Now, what's interesting is that there is in the technical volume, you do have to, it most commonly has 2 parts, each with a page limit. And it is asking you for a lot of data to substantiate what you have already done and why you say that you are prepared to go directly to phase 2. Okay, so at the top here on the right-hand side, it says provide documentation to substantiate that the scientific and technical merit and feasibility described in the phase 1 section of this topic has been met and describes the potential commercial application. And then it tells you the type of documentation you can include: technical reports, test data, prototype designs, and performance goals. Maximum page length for feasibility documentation is 20 pages. And it goes on and provides more detail, but you do have to substantiate. So 2 takeaways here. There are selected topics that are direct to phase 2, and they are designated that way. Expect that in the technical volume that there will be 2 parts, and you have to provide substantiation to demonstrate that indeed you can go to direct to phase 2. Because usually an agency is doing this if they want to get to the market faster. They need something faster. This is an example of a direct to phase 2 topic from NGA. And so that's just to show you the types of things. And this is with respect to existing pipelines. This is with not, the pipelines like with oil and gas. This is with artificial intelligence and machine learning. All right, so I'd like to just take a short break, about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll continue on with the presentation. And at that point, we'll be talking about out of cycle, okay? And then after that, we'll address any questions that you may have. So I believe that we're at about an hour mark. So we'll be back in a little bit of time. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to get started again. And Rebecca, could you just verify that indeed you can hear me okay?
Sound is good, Jenny.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you very much. Okay, all right. Okay, so we're going to talk about DoD out-of-cycle opportunities. What we focused on during the first hour was basically the traditional, is how they're referred to, the traditional cycle, but there's a lot that takes place out of cycle. So probably the leader in doing more different things than anybody else is the Air Force. It's really hard to keep up with the Air Force. They are doing so many new and interesting things. And so we use the acronym, or I used the acronym earlier, of CSO, which stands for Commercial Solutions Offerings. And so Air Force is the one that is using CSOs. And so that's what you'll see posted. And so how do you find the CSOs? You find it by, again, going back to DSIP, and you look at the BAA schedule. And I'm going to use an archive BAA as an example. And you will see in a moment that the CSOs are on the list. And you can download them. Usually, sometimes you have to go to beta.sam instead. But this is the screenshot from DSIP that I showed you before. These are archived solicitations, BAAs and CSO. And so you see that I have arrows pointing to the CSOs. And so 21 means it's FY21. .1 is, for SBIR. And so you see a variety of them, A, B, or STTR. But there's a lot of these out of cycle CSOs. So what is a CSO and why did that come about? So basically it stands for Commercial Solutions Opening, and there is a pilot program that is going on right now that was brought into being in FY17 by the National Defense Authorization Act. And it was to try and find new ways to fill different gaps that were existing, especially in meeting the warfighter need and being, the leader from a military perspective. And the major difference, if you go down to the second bullet, is that the CSOs can be used to acquire innovative commercial items that directly meet program requirements. It's not uniquely for R&D. Okay, and so Air Force in particular, but the other services are following, are trying to get more non-traditional companies involved. Companies that haven't worked with DoD in the past and may have technology already that could be used in a different way to solve a problem. Okay, so the CSO is the vehicle for that. Now, the CSOs have what are referred to as open topics. And the open topics are very broad. It does, in a way, harken back to investigator-initiated. However, it has to relate to the 5 strategic areas. And so these are the 5 strategic areas. Global persistent awareness, and each of these are defined in the documentation. Resilient information sharing, rapid effective decision making, complexity, unpredictability, and mass, speed and reach of disruption and lethality. Now, blue sky is meant for something else that you see as a need that we don't have a category for. Okay, so that's blue sky, very open. So the idea is to solicit technologies, ideas that will, R&D that will address these 5 strategic areas using CSOs. So, likewise, in the documents, it has a chart. And it talks about what is expected in phase 1 and what is expected in phase 2. So, in phase 1, the award amount is not to exceed $50,000. The duration of the initiative is 3 months. So it's very short, okay? Very different than what we saw with the traditional BAAs. So very short. Let's sample it, let's try it, let's see what we've got. The technical volume is different in terms of more ample requirements, okay? And it can be up to 750,000. So this is very different in kind because its intent is different. Now, another thing that's different about the Air Force, and other parts of DoD have been doing this as well, is using a different vehicle. Most often when a small business develops a relationship with the government, it is using in the SBIR program either grants or contracts. This is another vehicle, OTA, and which stands for Other Transaction Agreement. And as it mentions here, this was brought about by 10 U.S.C. for prototype projects directly relevant to enhancing the mission effectiveness of the military. So it's a different type of agreement. So what does a proposal look like? The surprise look is the surprise look. It's a 25 slide deck. Okay, so it slides. It's not a written document. 11 of the slides are required in terms of content slides. 6 are additional as applicable. And then there is a white paper that is optional. And this is just for the technical volume. Again, keep in mind that there are other volumes that are part of the application package, but it's a 25 slide deck. So what are the 11 required slides? There's an overall summary slide, technical merit. Now, this third one looks very much like what you would have seen in any proposal: concept and significance of the problem or opportunity, summary of the solution's commercial potential, the team, the ability to perform the research, the defense need, the objectives, the outline including the subcontractor's efforts, the transition plan, transition to the Air Force, okay, which will require a memorandum of understanding, related work, and then clearances, certifications, approvals, registrations, whatever they are requiring. Additional slides if applicable. So foreign citizens, facilities, equipment, etc. Technical data rights, again, that shows up here. Supplemental information on direct labor cost. And then you can include additional slides up to the limit of 25. But there are the 11 that are required, and then these are additional slides if applicable, and you can include more up to the limit that is provided. So the white paper is optional for a phase 1 CSO. It's required for a direct to phase 2 CSO. And the outline is provided in the appendix to the document that you would have downloaded from the DSIP website. So let's take a look at a sample Air Force Phase 1 CSO topic. This is very, very different. So the research technology and laboratory focus areas, it is those top 10 that we talked about before. 5G, cybersecurity, biotech, it's the list that we saw at the beginning. Then there's also technology areas, and these tend to be platforms like ground, sea, nuclear, weapons, electronics, space platform, I mean, all across the board. This is not specific, this is very broad. And what is the objective? Now here it's introducing, under objective, it's introducing AFWERX, which we will talk a little bit about. So the objectives, so if they're going to, it reiterates the ceiling on the award, $50,000. It reiterates the period of performance is 3 months, 2 for doing the technical work and a month for writing the report. Reiterates how much the phase 2 would be, the duration of the project. And its objective is to explore innovative defense-related dual-purpose technologies not covered by other SBIR topics, not covered by the traditional ones, of which they have a few, but it's very open. Therefore, the topic will explore options for solutions outside the Air Force current focus fields, but could be useful. An additional objective is to grow the Air Force's industrial base. This is actually part of the mission of AFWERX. AFWERX is not synonymous with Air Force SBIR. AFWERX is broader than that, and SBIR fits under that. But its goal is to develop partnerships with the industrial base. This topic is intended to reach companies capable of completing a feasibility study and prototype validated concepts in phase 1 and phase 2. This topic is aimed at later stage research and development efforts rather than front end. So they could have something already, again, CSO means that they could have a technology that has been developed to a certain point and they now want to use it. So then continuing on the description of this topic, which is again totally different than what we looked at before. It provides a description of the Air Force, and it describes a description of why it looks to this. And then in the second paragraph, this topic is meant for non-defense commercial solutions to innovatively adapt to meet DoD stakeholder needs in a short time frame at a low cost. Proposals will be peer reviewed based on the criteria below, and it lists the criteria. And then it talks about the appropriateness and relevance. And here's the criteria. And then in summary, proposals for this topic should demonstrate a high probability of identifying a product market fit between an Air Force end user and the proposed solution through a non-defense commercial solutions adaptation. The topic is truly open. So again, this is totally different than what we've looked at before. Continues on, it talks about the 5 strategies. This again is in the topic description. So they're reiterating stuff that we already saw in the CSO. It has some links, and it goes on and talks about what it wants to see in phase 1, etc. So very different. So since phase 1 is short, since phase 1 is open, and if you want to get to phase 2, what does it really take to get to phase 2? You have to have a memorandum of understanding from someone within the Air Force. Relationship building becomes vital. So because there's so many different websites that are, at least I find that there's many of them, there's a lot of AFWERX websites. The question is, which one is the best website for SBIR, STTR? And it appears to me that it's this particular website, which is hyperlinked. And again, you see, instead of thinking outside of the box, get rid of the box, they certainly have done that with these open topics. And I want to draw your attention to the navigation at the top. The one that I think is interesting is SBIR STTR tools. And this is what you would see if you clicked on that. And the Air Force has a tracking tool for its BAAs and CSOs. And this is the tracking tool that is unique to them. And then this is to take you to the DSIP portal. So other things that you hear about are pitch days. And pitch days are with respect to selected topics. And this is a schedule that you'll find back on this under events. You'll find the selected topics and also the dates. So these are hyperlinks where you can find out more about each of these. So this one is nuclear, this one is space, and so there's a lot going on. All right, so what is AFWERX? Because AFWERX pretty much has become synonymous, it appears, with Air Force, SBIR and STTR. Again, taking from the AFWERX website, the mission is to facilitate connections across industry, academia, and the military to create transformative opportunities to foster a culture of innovation. And AFWERX was started in 2017 by the Secretary of the Air Force, and it reports up to the Vice Chief of Staff to the Air Force. And through AFWERX, it has these open topics that small businesses are able to submit innovative solutions to that have not yet been identified as a need by the warfighter. Now that's really interesting because in the past, most of the topics that, for example, with the Navy, the topics are identified by the warfighter. Okay, that's where they, in general, try to get them from. What does the warfighter need to do their job better? So this is very interesting that they're saying submit innovative solutions that have not yet been identified as a need by the warfighter. Again, I think that's another way of saying that it's not in the more traditional BAA. So in September 2020, again, very recent, AFWERX was adopted as an official Air Force organization under the Air Force Research Lab. And in this transition, the Air Force SBIR program office was moved within AFWERX and was adopted under the Ventures arm of the program, which is, again, another initiative. They have so many different initiatives, it's really hard to keep up with AFWERX. So one of the things that was interesting, and I don't know my military camouflage, so this may not be an airman, it may be Army, I don't know. So for those of you who are listening who are with a service, then you would know if I'm on or right or not. But the program is called SBIR for Airmen. And they didn't say airwomen, okay, but SBIR for Airmen. And what's really interesting is it calls out, and this is on the AFWERX site, that they can partner with industry to tackle their biggest pain points. So they're basically asking the airmen to define what are your biggest pain points. And on the website, they have this document. It's actually a set of links. It tells you that there are 1,357 companies that are in the AFVentures portfolio domain. And the 360 is information technology. And if this were live and I were to click on it, it would show me all the companies and it would show me what they're doing. If I were to click on energy and power, it would take me to a list of 63. So basically, they're starting with the airmen and saying, hey, if you've got an idea, go directly to the small business. Here they are, which was really interesting. Something else that you'll hear about is StratFi and TACFi. And this comes under the, this is supplemental funding. Basically, I think most of you probably know if you've worked in the SBIR, STTR space for a while, that you can get more than one phase one, more than phase one, phase two. And that's called a supplemental phase two, or a sequential phase two, or a second phase two. Agencies call them different things. So this supplemental funding is a second phase two, if you will, and it's referred to as supplemental funding, and it's a pilot program. And there are two of them, one called TechFi and one called StratFi. And it lists a variety of different eligibility criteria. So, and I have them a little larger on the next page. So for StratFi, which stands for Strategic Funding Increase, in order to be eligible for that, all of these have to apply. You have to have an active Air Force SBIR or STTR phase two or completed within 3 years. You have not already been awarded a sequential phase two. At least 90 days have passed since the beginning of phase two. You're not executing a prior StratFi, and that you have a secured end user and customer memorandum, which is a document saying that they're going to be involved. And it provides additional funding, and it can be very significant additional funding. All right, so what we've done is we focused really on Air Force there. There is much more going on with Air Force than what I've covered, okay? And so the key thing is just to understand how different it is, why it's different, that there are some direct to phase twos, there are some traditional topics as well that Air Force has, but a lot of what they're doing is really out of the box. So in terms of other out-of-cycle opportunities, DARPA has out-of-cycle opportunities all the time. And so what the arrow is pointing to, again, this was from the DSIP page. This is the archived SBIR, STTR, and you see this is all 2021. This is the one that is there. You can download. However, oftentimes what happens, and I think this is what happened with the DARPA STTR when I clicked on this, is it takes me to beta.sam, and there's tons of updates and things of that sort. It's much easier if you can download the whole document from here, but sometimes when you go to this site, it doesn't do that. It takes you to beta.sam. So I would, because of time, I would suggest that to find out more about the DARPA program, that you go to the DARPA website, and they have a series of documents which are very well done that you can download that talks about the programs and the unique features of their programs. And so I would suggest that you do that. With Army, it was curious, again, that Army did not participate in the traditional Release 1 or Release 2. So you can always go to the agency's website, which is what I did here. So I went to the Army's website, and which is new. Army is going through a lot of changes. I just, in the navigation, selected schedule. And so here I see just a little bit of information. I see the size of the phase 1 SBIR awards on the left-hand side, and that it's a base and an option. And then the size of the phase 2. But in terms of what is open, okay, they're phase 2s. This is open now. With SBIR or STTR, again, it tells you the phase 1 maximum, phase 2 maximum, and then tells you what is open. And I believe that that is everything that that I wanted to cover with you today. Again, there is so much that is going on with DoD, and it is equivalent to learning about all of the rest of the SBIR and the STTR programs, because there's more of them and they're more diverse. So it is helpful to have a structure, which is really what I was trying to give you today. So thank you for joining me. I will answer any questions, and I'll turn this back over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Jenny. This was wonderful information, and you always do a great job presenting it clearly and thoroughly. So very much appreciate that. It looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. I think you did such a great job breaking this down that that we just didn't have anyone come up with anything. I'll give everyone just a little bit more time. And I know that you mentioned earlier some information about TABA. Could you just briefly share kind of what a company could expect if they were to engage Dawnbreaker's TABA services on a DoD SBIR or STTR award?
Sure. Okay. So in terms of, TABA is a very interesting thing. Okay, because TABA is not necessarily liked by all of the agencies. Okay, some of them provide TABA funds on top of the award. Some of them take it out of the award. Okay, some of them will basically say that the TABA vendor can be paid once a year on a phase 2. So there's different things that agencies do. So I'll talk specifically about DoD, but TABA is an interesting beast. Okay, so we do a lot of TABA phase 1s for DoD. We do a lot with Navy, Army, MDA, and so what they can expect is that they would get a business strategist from Dawnbreaker and a market researcher and a service consultant. So the 3 would be part of the team. And our focus is always transition, always trying to help identify the path, who you have to develop relationships with, what's important, where the money is, to continue maturation in phase 2. So basically, the strategist interacts with the company to find out what they already know, to basically look again at what the agency wants to have in phase 2, looks for the gaps, and then we prepare a market research document. It's called a transition information packet that contains a lot of information about who you need to know, what their roles and responsibilities are, who the competitors are, who the primes are, and that type of thing is always included, and with recommendations as to what they should do. And that document is prepared by the market researcher, enhanced by both the consultant and the strategist, and then debriefed to the company. And so at that point, we're hoping that we know that the company will have a lot of information and they'll know what they need to do. And that's pretty much what we do across the board with phase 1s. With phase 2s, a lot of the Department of Defense takes the phase 2s out of the research dollars. And so quite frankly, for that reason, we're not doing a phase 2 support for DoD, because that's asking a lot. I mean, we do phase 2 support for other agencies where it's on top of, but it really is asking a lot for a company to take that out of their R&D money. So we have only focused on phase 1 with respect to DoD. Hope that answers the question, Rebecca.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. We did have a question come in as well, and ask if someone has a major innovation and it's unlikely that an existing topic has been thought of, how would you go about generating topics for new innovations?
So many of the services and components do have the ability for companies to submit an idea. And an idea means really a concept. You're not going to submit in great detail. You want to submit information regarding a topic suggestion. One of the agencies, and this is a little bit of an aside, but it really is quite interesting, is US SOCOM. 50% of their phase 2 awards come from other services or other agencies, because there is this thing called cross-agency awards that can be made, but the person's question was about topics. So Army lets you submit topics, DARPA does, SOCOM does, a number of the agencies will enable you to submit topics. And what you want to do in that case is to submit a brief idea and find out, what their process is. They may not let you know whether or not they're going to do anything with that topic. It may show up in a slightly different form. So if you have something that's really very innovative and it's already developed to some extent, what you might do is consider a direct to phase 2 and look and see if there's topics. Another place you can search is SBIR.gov, where you can search across topics and across solicitations. So that may be a helpful thing.
And Ginny, when you say that about submitting topics to Army and other components, is that via email to the TPOCs or through another avenue?
Through their website. Usually
website.
We'll have something that's, that talks to submitting an idea. So I know that on Army, I believe on the slide that I showed, it probably has something about submitting an idea, but usually it's identified very clearly on the agency's SBIR website if they're doing that.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, another question that's come in is, says this is a basic question about our eligibility, and they've done some research online, but haven't got the clarification they needed. It says they easily qualify for all SBA criteria, and we're working with 2 national labs and an independent university research lab to test the efficacy of IP developed within one of the national labs. Assuming a successful outcome, they will license the DOE technologies to aggressively commercialize them. DoD/DLA had 2 BAAs posted that seemed to fit, but it's unclear to me whether we're going to qualify since we're paying a research university lab to do the testing of the technology that's developed and owned by Department of Energy. Is that expense considered an indirect cost as stated below? And then they put in the definition of indirect cost being 2/3 of the work that's conducted by the proposing firm. And
yeah, that's a complex question. In that case, if there is an open DLA topic, I would, so maybe they've already done this, I would try to get an answer from DLA. If that doesn't work, I would go to SBIR.gov and ask the question there. And I should say that SBIR.gov questions come to us, and then I'd have somebody research it, okay? So, and it goes back through SBIR.gov, but a lot of the questions that aren't answered by a particular, that someone can't get an answer to, one can submit through SBIR.gov, and we support that initiative.
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
And this person said he sent the same email to Judy Glidden of Dawnbreaker. Okay.
Yeah, so Judy wouldn't know. Judy wouldn't be the person. So it should go to SBIR.gov and where there's questions, and then they will route it to the correct people.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Just a quick reminder to everyone, next week is National SBIR Week. So this will be a virtual free event where the Small Business Administration that provides oversight for SBIR, STTR, as well as all of the participating agencies in the SBIR program will be involved in presenting information about what they have to offer through their programs and meeting one-on-one with those who are interested to discuss their ideas for new technologies, hopefully to be developed through the program. So I encourage everyone to check that out. I'll stick a link in the chat as well. And let me see if we have any other questions. See, I don't see any other. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that should be a very good event. So I would highly encourage people to do that. One other thing I would encourage people to look at, again, depending on how new they are, is to look at the tutorials on SBIR.gov. SBIR.gov, I've mentioned a couple of times, it's meant to be the place where the one-stop shop for everything regarding SBIR, STTR. And they really do work hard to make that the case. With respect to the tutorials, there's also tutorials on acquisition processes. There's so much to learn when you're dealing with DoD that taking a look at the tutorials would be helpful. In terms of eligibility, there is also eligibility documentation that one can download from sbir.gov, which may help. But I think the DLA question is much more complex than they'd find an answer to in that. But anyway, that was still on my mind.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, that's good insights. I always recommend those tutorials to clients, no matter what stage they're at, because there's ones that start at the very beginning with program basics, and then more in depth with key topics like accounting and data rights, all these things that we heard some about today too. So it's something for everyone there.
Great.
And they have different formats for different learning styles too. All right. There's a question that's more about SBIR week. I think it's asking, is it worthwhile to demonstrate innovations at Tech Connect conference in DC to establish credibility and gather info for SBIR?
Well, in-person events are very different, obviously, than virtual events. And so virtual events have been a substitute during this period of time, but really, I would do both. I mean, there's nothing to be lost by going to participating in the virtual event. I think you'll get a lot out of it. There's a lot of interesting roundtables, and there's some webinars that are taking place from different agencies. So I think that would be really very useful. But I would say if you have the opportunity to also go to the Tech Connect event in October, I believe, an in-person event would be very helpful as well.
Yes, and so that's right. This is an event that's more for the National SBIR STTR conference that's held in conjunction with that one. So
yeah, good
suggestion there. All right, just another reminder, I will also be sending out the recording and the slides within a couple of days through GoToWebinar email. You'll receive those. You should also have been able to see them hopefully in the handout section of the control panel for the slide decks. I want to thank Jenny again for taking the time to give us all this great insight about the DoD's SBIR STTR programs and how to be successful in exploring those and responding to those opportunities. This is going to be a good time to prepare for the August pre-release of the next topics, as you saw. If you are based in Arkansas, please also engage our center, the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center, for assistance with preparing your application and those kinds of steps as well. And thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and that this was great information for you. I look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you, Jenny.